Welcome to the woods. In this video I'm going to talk about how I went off-grid. In a couple of the previous ones I've shown people round the plot and I've talked about why I went off-grid. You can go and check those out. But in this one I'm going to talk about how. And it wasn't as easy as I first thought it was going to be. About 6 years ago, when I first thought of, okay, let's do this, I thought it would be that simple. I thought I would just get some land and bang a cabin on it and Bob's your uncle. But as I looked into it, it became apparent that the planning law and rules that were in place pretty much made that impossible in Britain today. And as much as that was frustrating, I kind of understood why as well. If those rules weren't in place, then property developers would have bought up every woodland. They would have managed to get every piece of spare land going and just bunged houses on it. Rich landowners would have a mansion built on nearly every field, and why not? If there was no rules and regulations, they can make more money doing that than they can growing a piece of barley. So it's only right that those rules are there. But it does make it incredibly hard to live on your own land. Now maybe there's things they could do to change that. And it's been tried in places like Wales with the One World Development Project. But even there, it's not easy. And I know personally people who have been not only turned down but well and truly shafted by that project. So living on your own land is quite difficult, but it is possible. As I looked into it and asked people, I was given lots and lots of advice, and nearly all of it was wrong. I was told, you can put a caravan anywhere you want, that's fine. They can't do anything about that. Well, that's wrong. If it's got no foundations and it's a temporary structure, they can't touch you, that'll be fine. Well, that's wrong. If you put it on wheels, the council can't. Wrong. To the point that if you own some land, you're only allowed to stay overnight 28 days a year. The rules are quite strict, and the chances of getting planning to build your home are next to zero. Now, it has been done and people have applied for planning and they have been granted planning, but all those stories you hear, you know, buy 2 alpacas and then you can do what you want, forget them, honestly. There are several avenues you can take, and I'm not going to discuss all of them here. I'll talk about the one I chose and the one I've succeeded with. So about 6 years ago, when I decided to do this, I went through everything, was pretty demoralised, and I came across an article about a family that had built a home and had been granted a certificate of lawfulness by the council. And that's the first time I'd ever heard of a certificate of lawfulness. So I read into it and read all about it, and it turns out they'd used the 4-year rule. So I looked up the 4-year rule, and it's very, very British and based on fairness. And on the face of it, it's quite simple. It actually states that if you build a home on a piece of land and it's equipped with the everyday things you need to live, and you live in it for a period of 4 years, it's then immune from enforcement. The council can't ask you to take it down, and it will be classed as residential thereafter. And you can go and get your certificate of lawfulness from the council, but you don't need to. After 4 years, it's automatic. It's now legal. And I thought, well, that was pretty good. There's also the 10-year rule, which applies to existing structures. So if you were to move into a a barn on a piece of land and convert that barn into a home and stay there, you would have to be there 10 years because the structure was already there. Or a caravan, which is an existing structure. If you pulled that onto a piece of land and lived in it, you would have to be there 10 years. But if you build it, 4 years. Now, on the face of it, it sounds fairly simple. But, as with everything, there's always a couple of smart arses who think they can circumnavigate it, do it quicker and better and easier. The first one most of you would have heard of, which was the chap in Sussex who built the mock Tudor mansion, the castle behind the hay bales. And then after 4 years took his hay bales down and there was this magnificent house right in the middle of a field that could be seen by everyone. And the council, quite rightly in my opinion, said no, that's not on. And they took him to court, and it went from the low courts to the medium to the high to the European courts, and in the end they sided with the council and they said no, you can't do that. You cannot deliberately hide what you've done, what you've built from view. And that added an amendment to the 4-year rule, which now says you can't deliberately hide what you're doing. Now that's completely different to what you're doing not being seen. You can't build hay bales all the way around it and hide it and then 4 years later take them down, tra-la, look at me castle. And you can't screen off the whole land so people can't see in and then 4 years later take it all down and say, tra-la, look at my house. So if you deliberately hide it from view, the 4-year rule doesn't count. The second case was for a chap who put in planning permission for a barn on his agricultural land. And now the council granted him permission for the barn. And he went ahead and built what to all intents and purposes looked like a barn. Inside, however, it was actually a 3-bedroom house. And he lived in there with his family for 4 years, 5 years. Went to the council, asked for a certificate of lawfulness. And again, the council were none too pleased and took him to court, and eventually the court sided with the council and said no, because the original planning application had been deliberately deceitful, the 4-year rule won't count. So it added another amendment to it. So now you can't apply for planning permission for one thing when in reality it's going to be something else. So you can't be deliberately deceitful, and you can't deliberately hide it from view. And I've got to admit, I kind of agree with both of those things. Don't lie, and pretty much on both of them, isn't it? Don't lie about it. If you're going to do it, do it. There's a massive difference about just keeping your mouth shut and keeping your head down and keeping a low profile. You know, there's no need to lie to the council or lie to anyone else. So that's the route I took. I took the 4-year rule, and in order to do that I found a piece of land where I could stand in part of it and look in any given direction, and I couldn't see anybody else's land. And if I can't see them, they can't see me, and if they can't see me, they can't see what I was going to build. Now that wasn't deliberately hiding it, it was merely the fact that it can't be seen. So I built my cabin, and 5.5 years ago I moved in, and I've been living here ever since. Now I kept a record of, a photographic record of the build, and I've got letters from people who have been here and stayed here, and I've got receipts from when I started the build right the way through until I'm still working on it now, to be honest. But it's good to have that. You'll need that if you choose this route. And there's a lot of other things which you're going to need to understand if you use the 4-year rule. But I'm not going to go into all of them here. Things like access to the actual part of the land where you're going to do the build. It's very important. If you watch my battery video, you'll kind of get an idea of why it's important to be able to get to the actual part of the land, not just onto it. As soon as that book's finished, I'll let people know on here, and you'll be able to pick it up at Amazon for a tenner, like I said. But in the meantime, if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments, and I'll try my best to answer them. Hit like and share this video with anyone who's going to be interested with it. Speak to you soon, people.